Hello, everyone. Yeah, we're back live. So, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Candid Talk podcast. 2 weeks ago, we had Mary on the show, and it was very very interesting. Today, we are back with the regulars, Stanley, Dewale, and Bane. Guys, wave to the audience,
Hello.
wave to
Hello,
the
guys.
wave to the 50 million people watching. No pressure, no
Right.
pressure.
No pressure, man.
Yeah, no pressure. Yeah, so 2 weeks ago we spoke about the Nigerian educational system and the decline, the very, very painful decline in quality training, budgeting, investment, and leadership. And we thought this week we should look at, because we focused on tertiary institutions, we thought this week we should look at secondary schools, so which is a very, very critical level as well. And I thought we should look at what has happened to these secondary schools, especially unity schools, and I think most public schools, to be honest, that trained millions of Nigerians, especially in the 70s and 80s. And when you compare the level of investment or the cost of education back in those days to what we have now, there's a massive discrepancy in value for money, for instance. So, Wale, I am going to start with you first. Um, could you touch on, is Wale sleeping? I can't see your eyes. I thought you were sleeping. I was like,
I was looking down. I
oh,
was looking
okay,
down on my
okay,
notes and
okay. So I
yeah.
think I think the best way to put this question to you is, um, obviously we know there's a decline. We know there's a decline. We know that for you to try to afford the same quality of education as we did back in the days, you probably have to pay through the roof. Could you talk about what, in your own opinion, the top three reasons why you believe that we have this massive decline? Then we can then look at the possible solutions later on. Maybe Bane or Stanley will talk on, we pick on those topics about the solutions.
Fab. No, I wasn't sleeping. No, no, no. I was looking down at my notes and some of the things that I put down. Um, you know, during the week because it was back of my head. Just passive thinking about it. During the week. Google searches here and there, and a couple of things happening today leading to that breakdown. And what we have is a peculiar situation where the education, what the secondary school education in Nigeria means, is sort of likening it to a loaf of bread, and then someone just taking out the the soft inside of it, and then presenting that loaf to you. And so you have the fancy universities, which are just still doing what they're doing. You have the fancy primary schools, which are still there, but then you have absolutely zero when it comes to secondary education. It's not like the primary and the university are doing substantially greater, but I think bigger wreck happening at the secondary level. And my findings, number one, is that um, there's a lack of teachers. There's a lack of good teachers, and there's a lack of good teachers because there's a lack of focus on investment in training teachers. So I was looking at the National Teacher Institute (NTI) Kaduna, which used to be a very reputable organization in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, founded in 76. And if you find the crop of the teachers that became, people that founded some of the best, and that ran some of the best secondary schools in Nigeria, some of the teachers that we had, they all came out from that place. But if so look at between 75, 76, and 85, that crop of teachers who now have just retired, if you know, after their service. But in our own time, in the 90s, 2000s, were at the peak of their career. But if you take a look at that institution today, just go to their website and see what's happening there, and just do some Google searches about that institution. It's relegated. It's relegated. It's unfunded, underfunded, and there's so many other contesting bodies for what it's doing, which aren't actually doing what it's doing. So you have the tertiary education fund, the TEF, so many other parallel bodies that assume the position of the teacher training institutes, but don't actually do the work of the teacher training institute. So we end up having um, a dearth of qualified teachers. And what that means is that to get a teaching job in Nigeria today, all you need to do is to not find a job anywhere else. All you need to do to find a job in teaching today in Nigeria is to not find a job anywhere else. And even the government propagates this by forcing NYSC students into schools to teach. And so when those guys, they finish and they end up not finding any job, they just come back into the schools. And so because it's that's the there's no gate. There's no gate for people to come in through. There's no proper training. There's no funneling to select the best. You have that problem. So number one, which is training. Number two, do you know what the average salary of a teacher in a secondary school in Nigeria is? Do you have any idea?
No idea, but I suspect it's an absolute
Okay.
shambles.
So an average secondary school teacher, which is grade, I'm not quite sure about the grades now, but middle level will go home with 45,000 if they get paid. If they get paid. So it's non-attractive. It's it's bottom of the barrel job, which when you compare the work done with the compensation, it's actually it actually makes it even worse. Because if it was 45K for doing almost nothing, you know what I mean? Then people will say, okay, fine, I'll go into it, I'll do it. I'll use my spare time to do other things and I'll build myself in this career. And if I get so there's it's 45K for thankless job for nothing. And also it's also the fact that it's um it's also the fact that there's no aspiration for it, right? So there's no aspiration in it. So how do I progress
Hmm.
as a teacher? So in the corporate world, you look out for promotions, you look out for, there's a career path.
Yeah.
So that number, I've said about three things now. The
Hmm.
fact that training is zero, it's been underfunded, and if you just need to take a snapshot at the Nigerian budget from 2009. So Obasanjo was giving us, I think, about 8% up until 2007. But just look at
Hmm.
the budget of the country from 2009 to 2018 to give you an indication of how much the federal government has put into education as a budget. Don't forget that when you look at the education budget itself, you have to now then go and unpack that line. And maybe Stanley will have more insight. You have to go and unpack that line and see within the education itself, budget itself, whatever that percentage is, 4%, which has been the average. You have to go and unpack it to see which percentage of that goes into training teachers, because then you have to look at what you pay salaries, which is about the absolute bulk of it. Salary is not for teachers, but for the ministry workers themselves. So the entire budget of education ends up not getting into schools, but getting into running the ministry itself. So that underfunding is happening. That lack of gates, which is people don't have any hurdles to cross. And you know how it is for you and I to get a job in Google or on Facebook today. It's like trying to get into heaven. but you don't have that gate for teaching in Nigeria today. So that's those are two problems. The third one I've mentioned, which is that it's the absolute bottom of the barrel. Like, you go into a classroom and the teacher speaks to you, and you just want to, you're like, why? You're like,
Bottom
why? So
bottom line, a teacher speaks to you, you never want to become a teacher.
you now want to become a teacher, and you hope that your word never ends up under that person, you know. And so
Exactly.
so so it becomes a place where people pass time. And it's the reverse is the case when you come to England. You know, I speak for England because I'm here, and I'm, like I said, I'm part of a board of a local primary school here. The rigor to get a job as a teacher in this country is insane. It's almost worth just giving up on it, because you have to go through, number one, you have to go through your DBS, your security checks. Are you even qualified as a person? Do you have the records to teach? Do you understand what it means to deal with children
Mm,
mentally,
yeah,
physically? Do
yeah,
you know what
yeah,
it means to be in the right space with children? Not to even talk about the professional qualification,
yeah,
which is something on its own. So teaching in Nigeria is an absolute joke. So, and again, this is not a standalone problem, because the funding is not there. People see it as an empty space. And the final thing I'm going to mention is the fact that it's highly unregulated today.
yeah,
So anybody and their mummies can have a secondary school, just pay a couple amount of thousands, get a license that nobody is checking what it means, and then put a board out there, and then convert to
mm,
two rooms in your flat, and you have a school.
yeah,
So nobody's checking that space as well. So
yeah,
when you have a school that is founded, zero regulation, very little visibility on the government that school actually exists, the recruitment is not gated, is not sophisticated. You get anyone and everyone into that place, you pay them whatever it is, and then you see iteration. I, if you think about the fact that when you were in secondary school, guys, how many times did you have turnover of teachers? You met some teachers there. In fact, you met almost all your teachers there, and you left them there.
yeah. Absolutely. It was a career. It was a proper career.
And so there's an aspiration. I can become vice president, VP academics. I can
Yeah.
become VP admin. I can become principal. I
That's
can become,
actually that's actually
So
a very good point. A very,
so
very good point.
that it's no longer, there's no aspiration
Yeah.
in that field. And these are some of the things that I found as fundamental issues. But that's not an exhaustive list. But I'm
Okay.
gonna
Stanley, I am going to come to you after Bane. So Bane, you can add some comments to what Wale has said. He's made, a lot of good points. Also, can you touch on why you think nobody wants to be a teacher anymore? Because, like we mentioned 2 weeks ago, education is very critical. It's one of the most important sectors in any country. And right now, I think back in the days, like Wally mentioned, people actually wanted to be teachers. I remember folks who trained me at primary and secondary school level, they were career teachers, they were proper teachers. They had been there for years. Folks who trained my, elder sisters, my elder brother, my cousins and stuff, right? So right now we don't have that. It's like it's been neglected. It's like Wally mentioned, it's like a joke. Nobody wants to associate, and there's no can't you can't tell anyone that you're a teacher and they look at you like, okay, I think you've got something good going on in your life right now. You understand? So Stanley's going to talk about how do we start mending this issue, or how do we start addressing this decline. But do you want to talk more about why we have this decline and the fact that, talk about the NCA as well, where right now getting that NCA certificate is like piece of cake. I've heard stories about what people to do right now to get that certificate compared to what you have to go through back in the days when we still had, a more serious sector.
Okay. Um, well, first of all, I want to just add to one of the to what I think this what I'm going to say now actually kind of answers both, covers both, adds to what Wale has said, and kind of answers what why we're here. The reason why teaching is not attractive. The reason why you know NC it getting the qualification is the way it is, and things like that. So for me, and this, if you notice, for all of our viewers and all of our listeners who have been following us, one theme that has been running through our thread when we talk about a specific Nigerian problem is the lack of data, or the lack of integrity of the data that we have. So
Mm.
let me start by saying, first of all, we know how many teachers are in the UK. So I'll give you stats. So currently, there are about, just give me, I'm filming now, one moment. In the United Kingdom, according to BESA, there are about 500,000 teachers in the United Kingdom, right? Now, BESA is the British Educational Suppliers Association. So, from that name, you can see that,
Yeah,
they're a veritable source of
yeah,
data. And this is teachers teaching in 32,720 schools in the UK. Now, of these, 3,700 are nursery or early learning centers, 20,000 are primary schools, 19 middle schools, 4,188 are secondary schools. There are 2,408 independent schools, 1,257 special schools, 352 pupil referral units. I'm guessing that's referring to maybe children at risk and things like that. What am I saying? What I'm saying is that this is very specific data. So if the central government wants to plan on any improvement, if there's a lack of teachers, there is there is an information, there's a data to go on, right? So before we even talk about the problem of Nigerian teachers, do we know how many teachers we have in Nigeria? And this also comes from the fact that it's an all-comers affair. Well, according to the registrar of the Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria in 2018, Nigeria had 2 million registered teachers. Now, I mean, as at 2016, I'm just giving you the stats so that I build up from there. According to Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, in 2016, our population estimate based on the census of 2006 was 193 million, right? Now, out of that 193 million, as of 2016, I have worked it out that the population of Nigerians between the ages of 5 and 19, which covers primary and to secondary school education, yeah, is about 70 million or thereabout. Now, if we're to estimate that maybe another 5 million, people got added to that population in 2018, by 2018 we would have had around maybe 75 million, because obviously we have a high birth rate, and this is my estimation anyway, or at least around that part. Now, based on the fact that the Nigerian Teachers Registration Council has said we have 2 million registered teachers, if you work it out, it means that we have one teacher per 32 pupils, roughly, if every child went to school. We all know that there's a high number of out of school children in Nigeria. Again, we don't know the stats for that. So do you see the problem? Do you get the picture? We have a lot of data that we're not sure of. Can you hear me clearly, guys?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, cool, cool. So
yeah. All
yeah,
good.
cool. So we have data that is not really clear. Because if you ask me from where I'm sat, I don't think we have one teacher per 32 students in Nigeria. That seems too good to be true for me because we have
Yeah.
overcrowded classes in a lot of our schools.
where we have classes.
That's where we have classes, where we have
Exactly. Yeah.
classrooms. I mean, we have overcrowded classes, and they're saying we are much. What they're saying is that we are much better than the United Kingdom in terms of teacher to student ratio. I
Yeah.
find that really difficult to believe
Yeah.
because if the UK with 70 million people have got half a million, and we are claiming to be 200 million people, and we have got four times that amount, about around four times that amount of registered teachers, it doesn't really balance. So my
To
question
buttress
is
the
from
point, Bane, to buttress the point, Bane, in
yeah,
1997,
yeah,
in my FG Sugumocho class,
yeah.
we were 444 in 6 arms. So A, B, C, D, E, F were 444, which meant that in my own F class, we were 88.
88 in a class. That's crazy.
Sorry,
So
78. Sorry, 78, which is not any
78.
different, but yeah, for
Mm.
accuracy, it was 78.
so you get the picture that there are two things that come out from here. There's something that Wale touched on earlier on. The fact that there are many overlapping agencies. There are so many agencies, which is typical in Nigeria, fighting to do the same, to carry out the same duty. So I don't know why we have a teachers registration council when there's a Nigerian Institute of Teachers. I don't know I don't know why we have a registration council. I mean, the job of a teaching institute surely should be to have a database of teachers. I mean, am I overthinking it? Because that's the way I see it. But anyway, that's what they are saying. So already we don't know how many teachers we have. A, because it's an all commerce affair. There is, like Wale has said, there is no barrier to entry. No reasonable barrier to entry into the trade, and that has to do with our economic situation where people just want to do the next thing that they find their hands to do to
Mm.
make a living. Um, so first of all, the reason why we're where we are again can't be divorced from our economic situation because, as you noticed before now, our economic situation was better. So you had people that went into teaching because they wanted to teach, and you had people that went into other um, available professions because there were jobs at least reasonably compared to today. Um, so my question is, and talking about teaching regulation actually, there's as it usually goes with Nigeria with a lot of these things. There's actually, and this is based on what a close relative has told me, um, that there is actually some sort of strict regulation in the urban center. So, for example, in Abuja, if you're not registered, their schools are regularly inspected. So I don't know if it happens nationwide. I'm not gonna, because again, there's lack of information about this. I don't know if there's inspection nationwide, but apparently, where she teaches, that if you don't have your certification from NTI and the school gets inspected and found out, the school gets punishment and all of that. Um, so so to a large extent, there is a, as with most things in Nigeria, like a two class. There are two classes of people. So there is a well-regulated part of Nigeria, well, in the Nigerian context, and then the rest of the country is just largely unregulated, largely unaccounted for, and all of that. So one, the question is, if most of the country is unregulated, what is the disincentive for people to just jump into the trade? What is stopping people from going to the trade? There's nothing. If someone in my hometown, for example, knows that once they're able to show up in a classroom, they can teach. What's
Yeah.
stopping them from doing it? If there's hardly any regulation.
Yeah.
So so
If
so 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 that's where I'm coming from. Mainly the fact that we have data that is not
yeah,
we can't rely on, or we have no data at all where we need data. is the number is for me is a fundamental problem, and it
And you make a
links to
good
what.
point. Yeah,
Eh?
you make a good point about the part where there's segregation in people who are regulated and those who aren't regulated, and all you need
Yeah,
to do to get regulated in Nigerian school, as a Nigerian secondary school, is to be a high charging and high performing school, right?
you
So
took the
so if you're doing really well, if you're a Corona, if you're an Adesoye college, if you're a, good school, they focus on you, which is what
Yeah.
regulators in Nigeria
Wale.
do, right? They
Attract
come to you and they
attention.
respect you. But if you manage to just stay below that threshold, nobody sees you. So it's just like
And
it's like the
nobody
tax
cares
bracket.
about you.
And
Nobody
that,
cares about
What
you.
in the tax bracket, right?
you've taken the words out of my mouth, Wale, because
Absolutely.
obviously this close relative of mine teaches in the private school, which is well run. It's actually well run for a secondary school, and they're actually for Nigerian teachers, they're actually well paid. They're paid more than that amount that you called, actually
Yeah.
twice or more, a bit
Yeah.
more than
Yeah.
that amount.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the proprietor looks after the teachers, and it's a well run school. They're
Yeah.
all taught
Just if you get out of a
during the
particular group,
lockdown.
then there's spotlight on you.
Yeah, during the lockdown, they're all taught from home. So you can see there are two lanes in Nigeria already. There is it's a part of Nigeria where they go to good schools, they are better regulated, so they get better because they get feedback from authorities. And then it's a largely unregulated part of Nigeria in terms of education, primary and secondary. They just left behind, and the gap is widening. So
Yeah.
that is another problem. So it's just a case of I don't know if you guys have heard of this. I think it was coined by I don't know. Well, he made it popular. Malcolm Gladwell, the Matthew effect, where to him who has more is given. The whole
Yeah.
saying where people that have advantage get more advantage. So you have the schools that already have high standards are the ones that are monitored. Of course, they'll keep to those high standards because they know they are being monitored, and based on the fact that they know that they are in business because they have got those high standards. So it's a case of the good get it better and are well looked after, and the rest of the country is just left on its
Yeah.
own.
Why
So
do you think? Sorry, Bunny. Why do you think they are not trying to regulate the poorer schools? To put it that way.
I think it's
When I be careful what you say now.
yeah, I know, because
Good question.
interestingly, interestingly, my dad, and I don't know whether I should say this, but I'll say it anyway. My dad's last in his last 18 months in the Ministry of Education was actually a ZCI, that's a Zonal Inspector of Education. He did his job to the best of his ability, given the tools that he had. I don't know in fact, he was the pioneer zonal coordinator for the Northwest, and that was his last position as a civil servant. And as and he went to set up that office. And one of the things you're given 3 or 4 cars, you're given like a Hilux and all of that to go into the hinterland, to go to the rural sites and all of
And the
that. He did
districts.
that
Yeah.
in, yeah, districts to go and check, to go and carry out the inspector. I don't know whether that is still going on actively, considering obviously the insecurity situation in parts of the
Yeah.
country
Yeah.
today and things like that. So again, I don't know what the state of Ministry of Education is today, but I am guessing that I think one major issue will be the fact that there's no data, which is what I've touched on. If you don't know what you're regulating or what you're meant to be inspecting, how would you effectively pursue it? Maybe the Ministry of Education has better data and has this information that is not widely available to us, but we don't know how many schools we have in Nigeria. So I would say lack of data from where I'm sat, to lack of the required tools to actually inspect. I mean, one office, I mean, I've forgotten how many members of staff he had covering the whole of the Northwest is, I don't know how to, I don't know
It's
how that will work. And that,
abysmal.
I know, and then that's two. And then three, I'm actually against the whole concept of a federal government controlling education. So the fact that my dad was working as the federal minister of education, as a federal at the federal level, and having to cover 5 or 6 states, for me, was not. It's not something that should have happened. Do you get what I'm saying? I'm saying that whole structure is wrong. We've got it upside down. I think that when it comes to primary and secondary school education, it should be catered for and should be taken care of by the local governments and at best state governments. Why? Because they're closer to the people and they can. I think it's best that local people deal with their education, especially at that age.
Yeah, because they are
So
closer to the challenges, they are closer to the
exactly to the
problems.
unique challenges that each
Yeah,
area has.
because the
So
problems are always local. So you need people
thank
who are
you.
local to address those issues.
Exactly. You've said it better than I could have said it. So I think that is a problem. The fact that it's done federally and centrally is a major issue in my opinion. I think that the federal government has no business determining what somebody in my hometown how they get educated from primary school. I mean, we have local government primary schools, but I think it should be purely done by them. The local councils
Yeah,
should purely be in charge of that level of education. And then maybe there should be maybe some special schools could be run by the federal government, but
yeah.
that's about it.
Or they should just provide oversight. Just provide
Exactly.
oversight, or perform some regulatory work for not regulatory, like some audit work for the local government. Just audit them, look at what they're doing, look at how effective their
And take
infrastructure is.
best and take best practices and try
Yeah,
and see how you can
yeah,
spread it nationwide and
exactly,
standardize things across board. It should be the federal government's job should be standardization, nothing more really, in my opinion.
exactly. Yeah,
There
yeah.
should be standardization. It's just like in most countries in Europe, I don't know how it happens in Canada. Let me give you an example of
Mm,
how so different things are. France, for example, apart from the UK, which is strange, in France, um, different regions have um, different start dates. So you know how we know that in the UK now, next week is school
schools,
starts.
yeah, school starts.
In
Yeah.
France, if you're from a certain part of France, it will be next week. Some other parts will be 2 weeks later. Some other
Mm,
parts, and so on and so forth. So, and it happened, and it's like that in a lot of countries on the continent.
mm,
So that tells you how localized these things are. So that's the kind of thing I would like to see play out in Nigeria, where we have local governments dealing with this local, or at least regional governments dealing with specific issues
mm.
regarding that area. So yeah, I feel that A, there's no data. B, I think the federal government should have no business running that whole setup. And yeah, data and that I think the system itself
Yeah.
is wrong inherently. The way it's being
Okay.
done is wrong.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. So because we are time constrained, we have about, I think it's going to be 45 minutes today because Bunny has to run, right? So Stanley, you're probably going to have the chunk of the rest of the
yeah,
rest of the time. So, but before you take a stab at this, I would also like you to talk about, because we haven't talked about leadership, the role leadership has played in this decline, in this breakdown, in the sector. I would like you to talk about it. I think I made a note of something I wanted to. Um, yeah, so if you can touch on the role leadership has played, and of course, what we can do to redress these problems that we have, and also when you're talking about the role leadership has played, also talk about messaging, or how the government has portrayed the teaching, the role or job of a teacher. Because the reason I say this is, if you look at NYSC, for instance, if you go for your youth service, they just post anyone to schools, regardless of they post anyone to schools regardless of your interest in teaching. And as we all know, education is very crucial. It's not something it has a lot of psychological component to it. It has a lot of psychological component to it. You have to be mentally prepared you have to be you have to be passionate about what you're doing, because it comes with a lot of challenges, and you deal with, I mean, I'm pretty sure you guys would have seen how there's a lot of emotional um, component to how they should have probably taught us and how they should have picked up on our challenges, schooling in Nigeria back in the days, right? But it was just a blanket approach. One teacher, you have one challenge that's different from another person, then that's your problem. You either get it or not, or you don't, right? But so you can see that the government is sort of trying to encourage this lack of interest in improving the quality of taking it, or taking it seriously. So you can go.
Okay, so I know I have very limited time, so I'll rush. So first of all, talking about funding for teachers training, we have a couple of those college of educations that are supposed to sort of basically produce experts for the educational sector. So
Yeah.
of course there are funding issues with those college of educations and the quality of training that the supposedly future teachers receive at those places. Looking at teachers training college, they basically receive the teachers training college in Kaduna receive about 2.5 billion annually. At least in the 2020 budget, it was 2.5 billion. Out of that amount, about 1.4 billion will go to recurrent expenditure. So that's about 1.3 billion for personnel cost and about 110 million for overhead cost, and then 1 billion for capital. But when you look at the Universal Basic Education Commission, they get about 137 billion or thereabouts for a year. About 20 to 26 billion, 20 to 25 billion for capital expenditure, and then the rest of it is overhead cost. And I'm mentioning these two examples because when you look at the budget, if you look at all of the federal colleges of education and all of that, there's substantial funding. Remember that the federal government also owns a couple of those federal government colleges spread across the country. In some states there are two of those schools. So there's a substantial amount of money that goes into it. But then there are also, like Bane mentioned, a couple of other agencies. If the teachers training institutes and the federal colleges of education are the ones that award the NCE certificates, right? And these are government-owned institutions. Why do you need a registration council? Um, to then register the same set of people that your institution issued certificate to. I don't know if you get what I mean. Is it that there's a different level of certification you need post this certification to get registered in this council? I'm sure there's an explanation for it, but I don't know what it is. But the point I'm making is that there are a couple of other agencies. When you look at the Ministry of Budget, there's a different commission for colleges. There's a different commission for nomadic education. There are all kind of agencies, multiple agencies that could just be simple a small department within an agency, right? And then you can concept the challenge as someone who works in government. The challenge is that when you have a separate agency or department, right, it comes with a higher overhead because you have to have your own office space. Even if you are seated in a federal government office, there is now, you have the head of the agency who gets a special, of course, when you are a DG or the executive director or whatever, or commissioner, chairman or whatever, there's a special cost that comes with that kind of, because you come on a different salary scale. There are all sorts of allowances and privileges that come with that. That increases overhead costs. All of that money can go towards better things if you are just a department under a ministry with a director who reports to a minister, right? Or you can pull all of these agencies together and set up a single commission. Now, a department in that commission oversees curriculum, a different agency oversees higher institution, a different department sees. So you can sort of begin to reduce costs by merging all of these people and putting them under one place, right? Also, I think that one other issue I wanted to mention before I get to answering your question is that in terms of what I think we can do differently, I think that we need to start measuring performance of teachers. It's not just about registration. We need to make conscious effort to monitor their performance. Performance is not about how many students are in your class. It's about how the students that go through your class turn out. It could, because these teachers get transferred from school to schools, right? It might be that a teacher will go to a school where somebody was already doing well. All of a sudden, they bring their bad teaching process, and then it starts to affect student performance. We need to accurately measure performance in a way that it shows when the teacher needs further training or not. Also, I think we need to streamline our agencies. I mentioned that we need to streamline. There are just too many agencies under education, nomadic, mass literacy. There are all kinds. There are way too many agencies. There's still a huge funding gap. No matter how much percentage you say we have for education in our budget, there's still a very huge funding gap. To show how huge that gap is, you remember when Wale was talking about what the average pay of a teacher is between 15,000 in primary school to 45,000. Even the private schools are not any better. The average pay of a private school primary school teacher is 67,000 naira. That's about $160-$170, right? That's not for a whole month for a teacher who's supposed to shape the future of people that are growing up. So we need to be very innovative with our school inspection. It's very critical that we think about how to improve our school inspection without incurring additional costs. Mani gave the example. I always have issues with when people sit in Abuja and then think that they will know what is going on in my village, right? There are better ways. If we innovate, we can better manage how school inspection is done in a way that it delivers the right result. Why do you need somebody traveling from Abuja to the hinterlands of Kebbi or Imo to inspect school? There has to be a better way to do that without, while he talks about him being on the council in also a board.
To be fair, using my dad's example, when he was made ZCI for the Northwest, he actually the office was in Kaduna.
Yeah,
just clarifying that. Yeah, and other ZCIs had zone in there as
I get what you mean, but then he's based in Kaduna, overseeing that zone with 6 states. He still has to travel all over the place. But my point is that why do you need to travel when you can sort of have a parents, teachers kind of, or a community-based sort of, those whose kids are in those schools who can be empowered, can be empowered to do this inspection, and in a coordinated format we submit provide reports. Also, I think that we need the federal government needs to completely butt out of this process and start to provide a higher level kind of policy and standard setting mechanism. They do not need to have their hand in the pie of day-to-day running of these things. You need to sort of devolve some of this power. You provide high-level standard setting curriculum issues and all of those higher level stuff, and let's other people take on the responsibility. We need to do better with our curriculum review. The other time I was part of a team that was reviewing some of the primary school curriculum and teaching aids. And the more I suggested, allowing teachers have access to the internet and using multimedia, opportunity. And the one pushback was they don't have it. I said, why don't you put it there? Once you put it there, I might be willing to donate a multimedia. It will cost me nothing to, provide a small TV, a DVD player to a school, right? And once that option is available, and I'm sure that there will be a way, either consciously begin to provide that, or allow schools to then solicit support from communities and see how they can help them provide those kind of things. But when you say because you cannot fund it, that should be taken away, you already shutting down any opportunity for anybody to be innovative. So I made a very serious push about that. So I think that we really need to open up the process of curriculum review, give people who are in tune with modern facilities, and understand modern trends and changes to make input. And I'm sure that when you do a curriculum review and you go to talk to the tech guys and all of that, they will make different inputs than what a 60-year-old education professor somewhere will contribute. So I think that we really need to open up that process of curriculum review and do it more frequently. We don't do it often enough. In terms of the role of leadership in the decline, again, I think that one of the key things, and you see federal government setting up a lot of federal government colleges, right? And I think I think they've slowed down now, but at some point it seemed like every state needed to get a particular number of this. For me, it comes back to what I keep saying. Now, when there's a problem, instead of tackling the problem head on, you've tried to build a way around it, right? Education quality was clearly an issue. Instead of tackling education quality head on, they decide that, oh, we can set up schools that are of standard, right? And that is the whole idea of federal government colleges. Instead of just saying, look, there's a challenge with our secondary school education, there's a challenge with our primary school education. How do we head on tackle it? They decide to create a special class as a way of solving the problem. It never solves the problem. So leadership indirectly sort of fuel this perception that, okay, so they've now created a special set of federal government owned colleges and a very, that can cater for a very small population, but the large bulk of the citizens are still out there, are still unable to access this quality education that you talk about. Only the privileged few are able to get into the federal government college. So they really indirectly sometimes fuel it. And I think it's not just an education problem, it's a general problem where when an issue comes up, face the issue, tackle it, solve it once and for all. We'll find a way around it. We really need to rethink that way as a way of this thing. What mechanism can we put in place? I think that we really need to allow parents and communities have more say in schools, right? For those whose kids are who have kids in these schools, we want the best for their kids. So we need to find a way. I know Antiobi Ezekwesili back then as Minister of Education tried to bring in private sector and then sort of put in some sort of co-management and administration of the school that involves stakeholders in every school. But we really need to think
that was the adopted school initiative, wasn't
it? Yes, adopted. So where companies can have more say, why they put in more money, they also have a stake in how the schools are run. I think we really need to think about innovative ways to run the schools. For instance, if you put me on a school board, if you put me on a primary school board, right, the fact that I'm associated with that school means that I will have to, as long as my name is there as a board member of that school, means that I will go out of my way to make sure that this thing doesn't fall apart and that that output from that school turns out really good. I think we need to think of ways to involve more people into, because
a good example of that is if you go to Falomo, there's a school that Granted Trust Bank adopted just by I think it's St. George.
Yes, St. George.
Yeah, I think I know that school. Yeah.
So we need to think of an innovative way where people can then put their names to it and then take responsibility for proper administration of these schools. I agree with you in terms of the type of message the government sends when they forcefully march youth corpers into schools to teach. When I did my youth service, I was forced to teach. I didn't like it. It's not something I'm very good at. I don't think I'm that patient for kids. So it was a huge struggle. It was a huge struggle for someone like me. And I every single day I went home, I'm wondering, did these students get what I was saying in class? I hate to repeat myself. Like I hate to say something over and over and over and over again. I become very, very impatient when I have to say the same thing over and over. But dealing with kids, that's literally what you need to do. as a teacher, that's what you need to do. So finding myself in that kind of situation was extremely frustrating. So, and I can imagine, several other people who had to go through that process doing something they do not like. I don't think that it sends the right message. And again, it's back to what I keep saying about government approach to solving problems. There was teacher shortage, right? There was teacher shortage. Instead of actively going out of your way to increase the size of the teachers training college to take in more students, increase the college of education to train more teachers, find a way around it. You find a way around it. Find people who do not have any form of interest in teaching and match them into the classroom and force them to teach, right?
Stanley, think about this. Sorry to cut you. Think about this. For you to teach in a structured economy, you would need some sort of training.
Yeah.
Right. Nobody cares about your educational background, right? Okay, you are educated. Thank you very much. But you need training. Do you know how long does it take to train a teacher in a typical Western economy? I haven't done my research on that. Wale or Bane, you can chip in with your stats if you have the stats. But I'm thinking it's going to be a considerable number of years or months.
I'm not sure about the UK one, and I don't think it takes years. I do know that you have to have some sort of
at
training
least 18 months.
before
18 months.
Yeah, I think it's between 1 to 18 months. Within 1 to 18 months.
Yeah.
You have to do
and again, people assume that training a teacher is just about making them subject experts. It's
exactly.
It's also about the psychology of managing.
It is mainly about exactly
the psychology of managing a classroom, understanding children behavior, and all of those things. There is more to teaching than just knowing mathematics.
This guy is brilliant. Go and teach.
I must say this though. In the UK, I do know that they have this supply teacher scheme. So I think it's a bit relaxed if you're for supply teachers.
Where they bring people,
because I've had friends that have been supply teachers, and I know that they didn't have any.
But tell me about the oversight.
The oversight.
Yeah, there's always someone watching you. There's always someone watching you if you do.
Oh yes.
Like that. Yeah.
Oh yes. There was the GCSE debacle. Just tells you how it all works, isn't it? I mean, is it I think it's Qualcomm. I think that's what it's called. I'm not quite sure. Is the body that is in charge of like schools and stuff, and the head of it had to resign because of the whole GCSE scores thing, where apparently there was an algorithm that was meant to score to rank to give assign scores to students based on some sort of
criteria.
The exam, but ended up scoring out of students lower than their teachers would have scored them. So anyway, long and short of it is that they ended up reverting to teachers assigning marks to students, and that resulted in the head of that organization being sacked. Let me just quickly, I think it's Qualcomm. I think I'm not really sure. But what I'm saying is that the consequences, that there's a body that looks into that. I mean, there have been times where schools there's an organization called Ofsted that I know. Ofsted actually looks at a lot of schools, and if you're not meeting certain standards, they can come in really hard on you. And so that's the kind of thing we were talking about earlier on, isn't it? Where the federal government has no business, the central government in Nigeria has no business running schools. They should be looking at it oversight,
like a higher standard kind of oversight role, not
like
being in the middle of the whole thing.
Just basically saying, look, guys, we have to level up, so so that no one is left behind. That's all their job is supposed to be. The school in the grammar school in Ogbomoso and the Queen Amina Secondary School in Zaria has to have a basic level.
For the same quality of teacher, because they've gone through the same training,
exactly. Now, so certain practices might be different, certain approaches might be different, but there is a standard across board. That's their job. But
Hmm.
as we all think in Nigeria, the government has more than taken on more than it should, and
Yeah.
there are loads of pox. I
Interesting.
yeah.
Stanley,
So
did you finish your point?
Yeah, so I just think that the last point I was making is that we need to like sort of go back to the basics, think thoroughly about teachers training. We really need to rethink that. We shouldn't do this. We're breeding a new set of monster that will the consequence will come out in another 10, 15 years. With the kind of teacher supply that we're doing to schools through this NYSC program, where anybody with a degree can be matched into a school to teach that doesn't
Yeah.
understand the children's psychology and how to manage a classroom and even spot when the student is having through a hard time. So I really think we need to rethink our supply system for teachers. There's clearly teacher shortage. The solution is not NYSC. It is about investing more money in training the right teachers and then supplying them to the schools, not NYSC.
Okay. Before we wrap up, I have a last question. I think that question is going to be to the house, every one of you. So, whoever wants to take this, do we have um, a strategy or process for identifying students with special needs in our public schools? I'm not talking about like the
This
coronas
guy.
and no, I'm not trying to take the piss. I'm just trying to be
That's
honest.
what you're trying to do.
I'm trying
This
to be no, 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 I'm just
guy.
saying, no, no,
Why
I'm
you
just saying
I'm being
because I saw Wale's tweet about
why
I
you
think
whine us now?
was it
Yeah, as in, like,
autism, was it autism or ADHD or dementia or something, or is it dyslexia or something? I can't really pronounce it properly. Some
dyslexia,
learning dyslexia, yeah,
this dyslexia.
What was
dyslexia,
the piece about? I tweet many rubbish sometimes. What was it
about
about?
learning difficulties, students with learning difficulties, and
rubbish.
identifying them early, identifying those issues early, and giving them the support they need. At public school level, do we have anything, any policy
Look,
or any kind of
look,
support?
Modi, what are you talking about? In Nigeria, everybody is judged by a standard, right? I told you, I probably have told you before, when I was in GSS1, GSS2, there was a guy in my class called Issa Mohammed, right? Whenever we wrote a maths test, Mr. Falabi would mark Issa's script first, right? And Issa most definitely will score 30 over 30. And that's his marking script. If you wrote your test any way different from Issa Mohammed's way, that's the end. So Issa's test script
Standard.
became marking script. So what are you talking about? Judging people by what's the learning standard? So
Oh my
He's
god.
winding up. He's winding
no,
us
no,
up. He's winding
no,
us up.
because if you go to King's College and you go to let me the elites of the unity schools back then, King's College,
King's College.
FGC,
QC.
you see how many were there in the class? There were 60 in the class. There were minimum 60 in the class. Go and check it between
Yeah.
95 and 2002. There were 50, 60, 70 in class. How do you identify what are you talking about? In my school that I'm sitting on, when you cross 12, you split the class.
Hmm.
You split the class. That's the regulation. But you have 55 people, 60 people. How do you and okay, wait a minute. So maybe you went to a different
Oh my
school. Maybe your process of schooling in Nigeria was different. But in my time, and I'm probably the one with the most recent um
I went to Jogs now, Ijebu Grammar School. So
exact. So I'm just saying, even in maybe the time, you had different teachers for different subjects, right? So one teacher had what maximum of 45 minutes, right? And sometimes when you had double period, you had 1 hour 30
30
minutes.
minutes.
yeah.
Yes. So is that how you identify someone with special needs? Because special needs is not that you have slurry speech. Oh.
Yeah.
Special needs is not because you cannot walk very well. Special needs is actually your pace of picking up, your pace of, and you're probably better at algebra than you are better at,
Yep.
geometry, those kind of things. You're dealing with 80 people in 45 minutes. Which one is
Guys,
is there?
I have a story. I have a story to tell.
guys, sorry to interrupt.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I just sorry before Stanley. I'm just about to go. I'll just say I'll let the guys carry on the conversation. It's a very important conversation we're having. It's been great talking with my guys as usual today. For those of you who are watching, I have to attend to something urgently.
Okay, I
I'm
think.
setting off now.
All right,
All right.
Bunny.
Cheers.
Thanks. Yeah.
All right, then,
Fun.
cheers.
All right.
So I
Drive
have
safely.
I have an important funny story. So when we were in secondary school, I remember with this my friend. How do you determine what class you put people in, right? So we had a
Yeah.
school counselor. So her job is to look at performance and determine if you'll be good in arts, science, or commercial subjects, like sort of the business focus.
Yeah, finance and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, finance and all of that. So I remember this my friend who wanted to be a lawyer. So he was very good with literature. He writes very well. All of those related subjects. And because he's smart, right, and he wants to do well in every other subject, so he was also very good with his mathematics, with his all the other science related subjects that we all generally take at that level before we get to senior secondary. So our counselor looks at the result, of course, takes the result and decides, oh, this
Science
guy
class.
will go to science class.
Yeah.
The guy said, no, I do not want to be in science class because I want to be a lawyer.
You're not yours to choose. What are you choosing?
It almost turned to a fight. The
Mhm.
guy's parents had to come to school and put their foot down and say, no, you can't force this boy because you think he's done well in mathematics and biology and integrated science does not automatically mean that this is where he wants to be. He wants
And
to be a lawyer.
and
He needs to be a, and like it took the parents coming and insisting for this guy to make that
yeah,
move.
because the
You
guy
know?
probably think he was doing him a favor. That
Yes,
chancellor thought he was doing him a favor.
you know how it
Crazy.
is that the smartest students are
Go to science
in
class. Yeah.
science class, so they do
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that if you are that smart, you should go and be a lawyer, or you should
Yeah.
go to arts class or
No,
science class
they
or
wouldn't even
commercial
look at
class.
it that way. They wouldn't even look at it that way because when you talk about being a lawyer, that means you are putting a career before the actual process you have to go through or the path you have to go through
Yeah,
before you get there, right? So I think
yeah,
what they do is they look at the path. The path is always, is looked at as something that's not very serious. So
yeah.
the moment they see you as going to a commercial class or an arts class, they'll be like, you know what, like you guys are not as serious.
These are not
The
serious. Yeah,
top
exactly.
guys, the serious guys, the
Yes,
brilliant
I
guys,
Can you be so brilliant? I want to do government.
you want to go and
government.
government, what's that?
Exactly.
Can
What's
do
that?
economics.
Like when I completed my junior WAEC, I think what they did in my school was they put like it was like an interview. It was one teacher in charge of it, and they put people, they'll just call you and they'll look at your results and they ask you what you want to do. And at times they will tell you like, I think you'd be good for science class. You understand? And it was a
Mhm,
thing. Even it was a thing of like, thing to brag about. It was like a prestige thing
mhm.
where
If you're
you
in
you
science,
you tell your friends, yeah, I got science. Oh, yeah, A parallel. Oh, that means you get science. There's no logic or
to it.
there's no logic to it. Like, there's no like psychological component of what exactly do you think you want to do, and even
Yeah.
like the parental side of it is also very important. I think as parents too, we need to be involved and invested in things like that to really say
Mm,
like that example you gave is a very good example because the parents knew they were involved in the whole process, so they
mm.
knew or they were invested in what their child wanted to
That
do,
becomes
so
yeah.
they were able to stand up and say no, you have to let this boy do what he
What
actually
he
wants
wants
to
to
do.
do. Uh,
It's a frustrating process.
so
So I
again,
wonder what you mean when you say, is it,
is
do
it
we have
possible to identify possible special needs?
No,
That's like
no.
um,
fantasy.
I just wanted see at times see this is why I like this podcast because we we say a lot of things, and I like that we sort of have different backgrounds in a way, and we bring a lot of diverse thoughts and opinions. So I asked that question because someone like me will go out and say, "Oh, it's a joke, it's a shambles. We don't have this, we don't have that." But Stanley will give some perspective, and I'll be like, "Oh, I didn't know that." You understand? So it's good to just ask,
Put it
right?
out there,
Like
yeah.
my own opinion is we don't have it. It's a big problem, a massive, massive problem for us
Yeah.
because if you miss it, I give you a good example. I was a science student and we had a teacher. This guy made me hate chemistry. Just that guy, right? Like I can talk about my own failings, the mistakes I made back in the days. Fine, I can discuss that all day, but I'm just talking about what he did specifically that contributed to just putting me off, really. Like this guy will come into class, something similar to Wally mentioned, to what Wally talked about, that the teacher will mark the most brilliant guy's script first, then use that script as standard for the rest of the
Mm.
students, right? This guy will only speak to the guys in front, his favorites,
Mm-hmm.
his friends, because he knew their parents. And he just had this impression that they were smarter than the rest of us. And he would only focus on them during chemistry. When he wants to ask questions, he would ask them questions first. And it was so obvious that we were irrelevant to him, and I just hated that class because I didn't want to see him. You understand? Like, seriously, it got to that point. I was like, "What is this?" It was so bad.
I know, I know.
And Stanley, like you always mention, there's no mechanism for grading or assessing, or like there's no
Mhm.
feedback mechanism for teachers. We don't have any power, right? So we can't mobilize and go to the principal to say this guy is taking the piss.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They would literally, destroy us for doing that.
Yeah.
And
You want to
not
go
just
and
me,
report Mr. Ojuro
Report
make
like the
like
principal.
I don't even know what this what you
you
guy are
have to be
funny
I know,
man.
mad.
I know. I'm
I
just
say
saying, no, Wale. I'm just saying that
you have to be mad.
seriously, you
Out
can't
of your
see.
mind.
You can't even you see. I think myself and Wale went to boarding school. I'm not sure. Stanley, were
I
you
did,
okay?
I did.
So three of us. You even struggle to go and report your senior, let alone
Not
a
a
teacher,
teacher.
let
No,
alone a
no.
chemistry teacher. Like teachers in science,
Are
teachers in
powerful. They're
sciences, they are
actually
very
powerful.
powerful.
Yes.
If you are teaching chemistry, chemistry is one of the most important, subjects in
Chemistry and physics.
chemistry
The
and
best
physics.
physics
Those are
teacher.
key courses, key modules. I
Uh,
know.
Yeah.
but
But think
you
about it
know,
this way, man. Think about it this way,
yeah.
man. For you to identify, look, we bant around on this podcast, and I know that, right? Somewhere in the archives, I can bet with you there's a policy around identifying special needs. There
Yeah, of
is.
course, of
There is.
course.
This country is not that terrible, right? We've got great minds. We have things on paper.
I agree.
If we wanted to run by what we have on paper in this country, we have some of the best policies. But you see,
Yeah.
implementation and enforcement is just
Mm.
always
I
that's
agree with
where
you.
things always drop.
I agree with
Now,
you.
look at the problem of identifying special needs. Think about physical special needs. How many in your school did you have step-free access for your classrooms?
No, no,
I didn't know what
no.
step-free access was
Until you guys got to the UK.
until I got to the UK. I was
Me
like
too.
step-free access. Like
Like,
you watch movies and you see all these guys, but you don't think
Yeah, you
you
don't
don't
think
process
it's
the
applicable to you as a
infrastructure part of
country
it.
as a yeah. Trust me. So if
Yeah, yeah,
and
like not just
all
looking
of
at
them,
them, not just providing stuff for them, the infrastructure, like they have their own economy. It is
yes,
an economy.
that's what I'm telling you that for you to identify for you if you want to know whether there's any policy or anything identifying, you actually have to see the infrastructure that supports them
mm,
for being in that environment. But you don't have it, right? And we all have classmates that people have to carry from one wheelchair to the other. We all have those people. And coming to school on its own was a living hell for them. So
mm.
you're talking about which special attention.
Hmm.
It's not because
And
you're a stammerer. The
this
teacher,
is a
you're a stammerer. So the teacher will
eh,
not spend time on you instead of slapping some sense into you.
it's even
Exactly.
have you not seen that as a stammerer, the more you stammer, the more they put care on your head. And they're stabbing it.
Yes.
Exactly.
Say talk normal, talk normal, talk
Exactly.
normal.
Exactly.
Talk,
Somebody is
talk.
tired,
Stop
tired.
stammering.
You
And I'll
see,
tell you, and I'll tell you, you cannot, like a huge chunk
hmm,
of Nigerians
yeah,
cannot go home, because I'm talking about the critical mass, 70
yeah,
to 80%. Because when we talk about Nigerians, we are not talking about elite, we're not talking about the 10%. So we
yep.
shouldn't get carried away. So a critical chunk, at times you get the exceptional cases, fine. You get home, you can't even go and tell your parents that this teacher beat me for stammering. You don't you likely not have a case. so so from
Your,
the parent side,
your parent too wants you to stop stammering.
Look,
exactly. And
look, look,
they will
my
probably hope
guys,
that maybe if
guys,
they
guys. I'm the last born.
Wale no kill me.
I'm the last born in my house, right? And my eldest sister just celebrated her 50th birthday yesterday.
Yeah.
My second eldest sister, when she was in secondary school, she was like 15, 14, 15. And I remember, I think I was about 3 or whatever. She came home crying that her teacher beat her, for I can't remember whatever it is now. My dad, the next day, drove her to school with 4 tubers of yam
What?
for the teacher. I said, thank you.
What?
Oh my god.
So,
Oh my
so why do
god.
you want to go home and tell somebody that beats you so that they don't give you yam again?
Give me-
So you see the point because
oh dear.
because at that time parents thought, if a teacher disciplined you or beat you,
That teacher
you are
is
is
interested in
right.
you. Is
If the teacher is
interested in your
right, you are
progress.
wrong.
Yeah, and no, not just that. That teacher is interested in your
Yes, for him
progress.
to have picked you to want to,
To say you're doing
and
something
it's
wrong. So
it's
that means
it's,
they've seen something. I
it's
know, it's
just
crazy.
it's a warped economy. So why do you want to go home and tell somebody that somebody did? You just keep it to yourself now because instead of you to just enjoy that pain alone, you enjoy the pain, then they will now bless the teacher again with yam.
So
Just
so
keep
you
your mouth.
see, you see the impact. So we
Yeah.
all came out of that system. And how do you someone sent a tweet that there's a lot of folks walking around with PTSDs, that they
Mhm.
need different forms of PTSD, that they
I'm
need
one of them.
therapy. I think that you guys follow L Nathan John, right?
Yeah.
That guy is literally one of the most left wing Nigerians I've ever seen in my life. Like, I thought I was left wing. That guy is, and do you know how to know a left wing person? Someone who literally pokes you, like someone that was going to poke your, if
You're
you think,
thinking. Yeah.
yeah, they'll poke it. Like, okay, you have housemates, maybe you are a slave trader or something like that. They'll ask those core questions that will get you thinking. That guy talked about the fact that almost every Nigerian has PTSD or has been abused as a child in a way. So how do you expect? No, no, with he spoke about violence. He spoke about violence, and if you look at the way our teachers beat us back in the days, it was almost violence, right?
Yeah,
Like,
it was. It was.
so that's the guys doing that to us were our leaders then. They were the people we looked up to, the principals, the head teachers. We went to boarding schools, right? So the head of the boarding school, that guy was like a god, right? So if that guy is beating somebody in front of you, you won't think he's doing something wrong. Even if you justify it from a discipline point of view, but at times it just gets too much, right? Like it
Those
becomes
guys
abuse.
were satisfying their fantasies with us. That's what they were doing. Do you know that in staff room, these guys they go and boast about who can flog the best.
Hundred
Mhm.
on
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah.
you were nothing but just logs of wood to them. So there's no these guys they were abusive.
I know.
Simple and short.
Yeah, because we didn't have any alternative way of addressing an issue, a serious issue. So the only way we knew how to do it was to use force, potential violence, striking someone. And it is very important because it's difficult for you to rationalize it elsewhere, or in a different way, or to find an alternative. What else? You're being silly, I'll smack you, right? So, because and again, education is key, because that's where they put all these things into you. I use the word the term brainwash a lot, even though it can be negative. But I look at the way governments across different Western countries use education to set people on the right path, to imbibe some kind of civilized way of doing things into the young ones. Because what you do at that level, this is why teachers are very, very important. What you do at that level is going to impact the way these kids are going to see problems in future. So if in a structured institution like a school, you're always beating students, you beat them, not only like you beat them in front of everybody, so you're justifying that. You say, okay, you do something wrong, you get beat. Simple, right? And again, did it really solve problems? Did it really make us better? Did we really apply that level of force to the more important problems that we had in schools then? Has it evolved now? Are we better now? Are we, addressing these issues in a better way now? No. So again,
Yeah.
guys, I think we should leave it here. And Wale, let me know what you think about primary school, whether we should discuss that
No, I
next
think we've talked.
week.
I think we've talked about it a bit.
Yeah.
Not to be flogging these
About
things too much.
love this
You
year.
know, but
Okay.
we've talked about the fact that I, everything we've said today applies to primary school. If you don't
Yeah.
train, if you don't have a gate
Yeah.
to make sure that only the best people stand in front of our
Getting.
kids in classrooms, is a failure. If you don't incentivize teaching as a noble, not just noble and poor, but noble and rewarding career, fail. If you don't, okay, let me rephrase my words so that I don't talk like a problematic person. Please, let's have a gate that properly identifies the best people for the job. Teaching is not, I can't find a job, I resort to teaching. Teaching is how your country is built. Education is how your country is built, your leaders are built. There's a video going around, about some Chinese primary school children playing this collaborative game where they were bouncing balls, and you bounce the ball, when it lands and bounces again, it's somebody else who's bouncing it. I don't know if you've seen that video. It's
Hmm.
talking about how people, the balls don't, nobody drops the ball. 40 kids in a big circle. The, this is how you build the psyche of your future leaders. This is, if you don't have the right teachers, forget it. You can't have the right leaders. You don't have right leaders, forget it. You can't have the right investment in education. And it's just, so this is, it's a chicken and egg problem, but this is, if you want to tackle it, this is where you start. So make sure that teaching is attractive, it's a career, people can aspire to it. And we can say of this for the police, we can say of this for the basic arms of government. But that's it. That's number one. Number two, if you don't fund training, where is the number one place that people can go to today to say I want to become a teacher? Where?
Hmm.
So these things are across board. It doesn't matter whether you're primary school. I have some stats. Did you know that 1 in every 5 out of school child in the world is Nigerian?
Hmm.
Let me say that again. If there are 5 children out of school in any time in the world, one is a Nigerian, which means that 20% of all out of school children
Children and
in the
Nigerians.
world are Nigerians. So
Wow.
the remaining, how many? So think about it. More 200 million people out of 7 billion people. That 200 million is producing 20%
For the whole 7 billion. That's crazy.
out of school children for the remaining 6.8 billion. It makes no sense.
Madness.
It makes no sense. And then between 2010 and 2017, the rate of progression from primary school to secondary school, according to the world to UNICEF, dropped from 93% to 46%. So by 2010, the chance that you were going to go from primary school to secondary school is
was less than
93%.
half.
93%, which means that funding, if you put funding into the perspective, if you put the availability of school into perspective, if you put space, let's say the school is not too full or something, when you put all the factors into perspective, you stood a 93% chance of progressing from primary school. But as of 2016,
It has dropped to less
it's
than.
now 46, which means that if you check it today, because
It might
things,
be worse.
from 2016, things didn't go up, everything just went. So it showed me, say, by this year now, we're looking at 30%. So what does that tell us as a country?
I have one last word. One last thought for this process. No word. My last thought for this topic is that we are, and which is like also a broader general problem, is that we're not a process people. We are not. We're not a process people. There is no process to. There's no method to our madness. We are just anyhow. I'm sorry.
Oh my God.
I'm being real. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to run us down.
But Stanley,
Is there anything you see in Nigeria, you manage it like that?
but Stanley, how come it is very easy? How come it's very easy for us to go into a structured economy, go into a structured institution or a structured entity and follow their process and perform admirably well
we are
following
humans.
that process?
I think we are humans, right? And there's that tendency to gravitate towards order as human, right? Of course, there's also that tendency when you get into a dysfunctional space. There's also that
You
tendency
revert
to
to
gravitate towards
revert to type, yeah.
that thing. So I think it's environment and which is why I brought up the issue of we're not a process people, right? And once we see process order, we're fascinated. We are like, okay, oh, look, I need to get on with this, and we're easy to blend in, and also that human need not to be seen as being obstructionist when everybody's going one way.
Suddenly
Yeah,
realize, oh, this can work.
This can be exactly that shock that, oh, this can work, and then want to just like jump right into it and enjoy that peace of mind, that organized process. So that's why Nigerians will easily excel, and also because they're coming from a very tough place, right? You're coming from a very difficult experience, and so when you get into an experience where it is easier, it is straightforward, it is merit based, you want to apply all your energy into enjoying that merit. So that's why somebody that goes through hell in our educational system will go elsewhere and sort of shoot all the because look, the amount of energy you put into learning here, all of the difficulties that are put in front of you, all of the obstacles that are in front of you, you then get to somewhere where all of this obstacle is taken away, and you're just there to study.
You
You
mean
don't have to sweat. You don't have to think of how to afford books. You can walk into the library, get any book. You walk into any faculty building, there's a system. There is constant light.
there's
Right?
light.
There is a computer in the lobby of every system.
Wale, no kill me, I beg.
Like, so look,
There's light.
once all of those obstacles are taken away from you and you are now free to think straight, of course you will excel. So it's normal. But here there is no method. Again, I'm sorry to use the word, but there's no method to our madness. Like, it is like as it comes to you, just give it to them. As your madness comes, just deliver it that way. Like,
Give
so
them.
you cannot say in the same, for instance, Lagos State educational system, right? You cannot say that the experience you get from a primary school located in VI is the same experience you get when you go to a primary school in Badagry.
Thank
They
God
are
you didn't say Ikorodu.
Oh, no, Ikorodu is so special. So there is no process to it. By process, I mean that the experience I get here should be the experience I get there, right?
Yeah.
Because it's one body, is being run by the same,
Yeah.
so there's a single head. All of the policies come from the same source. So why is it that the same policies that makes the primary school in VI good is the same policy cannot make a primary school in Ikorodu good? Right? So that's why I keep saying that we are not process people. There is no, you can't go to one institution and say, oh,
And if we know that the process is not applicable across board, then give that autonomy to locality and
exactly,
let them know that they're managing this thing. Just give them a framework
them the
and let them
power.
run with.
Exactly. So in one breath, they insist that we are all unitary. There's only one rule to it, right? But then when it comes to experiencing it, the rules are no longer the same. So I like we need to be careful about. And somebody said something recently. I can't remember where I saw that. Somebody said there's this assumption that improving our health system revolves around building hospitals and equipping it. No, there's a huge I think it was Wale that was saying there's a huge system in terms of how staff behave, in terms of how you respond to patients. There's a huge system around
Even
hospital
even
management.
even the patients. My wife's a doctor. I know this firsthand. She says sometimes someone comes to the hospital, educated person in Nigeria, and you tell them the reason you are having this problem, honestly, is because you are not resting. You walk. I've talked to you. You said you walk this. You drive in traffic. Honestly, just rest. And then the next thing they will ask you is, "So, doctor, you will not give me anything?"
Any medicine, exactly.
You see,
Exactly.
the problem is that with the doctor, yeah, even the
The
patient
patient, yeah,
does not believe in walking away from the hospital
we
without being
and
handed
giving a
some.
medicine,
So
yeah.
you end up saying, okay, go and take this because the guy doesn't want to go away from the phone without a prescription. So you prescribe something to him, he goes to go and buy something that doesn't need, it damages his liver, damages everything because he's using medication for nothing.
For
Mm.
nothing.
It's
So
human psychology.
again, is the process thing I keep saying that we really need to think about, which is why I said the federal government needs to completely butt out from this system in terms of direct management and focus on setting high level standards and processes that everybody can adopt, and then focus on enforcement of these standards and processes. I think beyond even teachers training and all of those things, just mere setting that standard, we open up the space for us to do what is right. That's my last thought on this. Like,
Mm.
we need to rethink our, no method to our madness, and sort of put a method to, recheck, this madness that we're experiencing that we
So
call
Stanley, let's be mad.
process.
Let's be mad. But let's have process. Let's
Yes,
have process behind the madness.
yes,
The
yes.
process behind the madness. Oh my god,
Nice one.
that's crazy. Okay,
Yeah.
guys. Yeah, I think we should end it here,
Mhm.
and we are going to be back next week.
Mhm.
And I think next week we might talk about. I mean, we can still discuss this further, but I'm thinking maybe we should talk about policing in Nigeria. That's something that I think. Sorry, say again.
I know deal.
No. We are not criticizing the police. We
What's
are.
that your friend's name again? That's a CP of police in Lagos, Stanley. You know you're still in Nigeria.
Oh, that very popular guy, Giwa, or what's his name? Is it that?
No, Yomi Kazim. What's his name?
No,
Oh,
no, no.
yeah, that
Yomi
guy.
Kazim.
Shogule, my guy, Shogule.
Yomi
Yomi,
Yomi Shogule.
Shogule. Sorry. They
that
moved
guy.
him, Abi. Stanley, is
I
because of
should
you. Because they
maybe I
cannot
should
arrest,
even see if I
they
can
cannot
get
arrest
him.
you, they cannot arrest me, even Ghanaian.
Bring
Because
him
you
to the podcast, Stanley. Bring him to the podcast.
If he sees my name, he will even respond. Oh,
Yeah, I think we can discuss policing, so we can talk about the different things to touch on infrastructure, centralized
communication.
might spend another 2 weeks
communication.
on that one. We might
Yeah,
have
yeah,
to.
yeah. So we can merge that with insecurity, which is a big topic now in Nigeria. But policing, I think, is critical, because the reason I thought about policing was when Bani was talking about decentralizing these critical sectors, right? So uh, the police is still a centralized force in
Yeah.
Nigeria.
Mhm.
So, and we've been talking about how decentralizing it might benefit the Nigerian state. But again, something we can touch on. All right, guys, thank you very much for joining us again this week, and we are going to be back next week. You can say hi to the. I think we've dropped down to 49 million now watching. So
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks to the
All
thanks,
right,
49
guys.
million.
thanks
So
for joining
after
us.
this, we'll go to Twitter to see the barrage of abuse
Feedback.
and abuse and curses.
We call it feedback.
Feedback. Okay, okay. All
All
right,
right,
guys.
Nice one.
Yeah,
Nice
all
one,
right,
next
guys.
week,
thank
man.
you.
Yeah.
All
Cheers.
right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.